Hi friends, this is Selvigno here. Welcome to my networking channel. Hope all are doing good. And today the topic I am going to discuss about how to perform redistribution between static and the OSPF routes in a Fortigate firewall. So as per the architecture, I connected three firewall 1, 2 and 3. So all these are Fortigate firewall. Okay. And first let us configure the directly connected interfaces for all these three firewall. So firewall 1 and 2 is in subnet 192.168.1.0. So this end will be 1.1 and 1.2, and firewall 2 and 3 is in subnet 192.168.2.0. So this will be 2.1 and 2.2. So first let us configure this directly connected interfaces, and the second thing I will be configuring OSPF as a routing protocol between firewall 2 and 3. Then I will be configuring a static routes from firewall 1 for reaching the remote destination network. Then afterwards, I am going to create the redistribution between the OSPF and the static routes in firewall 2. So this I am going to configure as a border router for redistribution between the OSPF and the static routes. Finally, I am going to configure a policy. So these are things I am going to do. So to make our work easier, I have written the script. Okay, I have written all the commands in the notepad format. So just we can copy and the paste it to the individual firewall. Okay, and for configuring the individual interfaces, so first let us configure this interface. Firewall 1 has one directly connected interface, that is 192.168.1.1. okay, so it is for port 1. So accordingly we'll change the script. So edit port 1 and the IP will be 1.1. So okay, so the IP will be 1.1. Just copy it and paste it on the first firewall. Okay, and similar way the second firewall has two interfaces, that is 1.2 and this is 2.1. okay, so let us go here to the firewall. So edit port 1, the first interface is 1.2 and the second will be 2.2. okay, so let us paste it. Port 2 it will be 2.1. So it will be 2.1. So let us copy this both the commands and just paste it on the second firewall. So I have done with the both the interfaces. One is 1.2 and 2.1. So how to view the configuration? Show system interface port 1 1.2 and port 2 is 2.1, right? Similar way for the third firewall it has one interface, that is 2.2. okay, so accordingly edit it. Port 2 is 2.2. so just copy it and paste it on the third firewall. So this is for defining the interfaces for the individual firewall. So the command is config system interface, edit to the corresponding port and set the mode to static. So by default it will be in DHCP. So set the mode to static, then assign a static IP, then allow access is ping. So these are the three things I need to do. So now let us do a ping from the this particular firewall to the remote interface and also from firewall 1 to this remote interface. Okay, so let us go to firewall 1, execute ping 192.168.1.2. So I'm able to reach the remote interface. Similar way from firewall 3, this IP is 2.1. Let us go here, execute ping 192.168.2.1. So the command for ping is execute ping in case of Fortigate firewall. So done with the first set of configuration, and the second part what I'm going to do is I am going to configure the OSPF as a routing protocol. So what is the command does? Let us go to the script. So for configuring OSPF, the configuration is go to config router OSPF, then let us set the router ID. In case of router 2, I am going to set the router ID as 2.2.2. then I will be configuring that particular interface in area 0. This is the backbone area. So for that the command is config area edit 0.0.0. that means area 0. I am configuring this specific interface. Then let us save the configuration, and the second step is we need to define the network and we need to advertise the prefix. So the command syntax is config network. Edit 1 is nothing but I am adding the first entry. So edit 1 set prefix 192.168. so this network I am going to advertise, that is 2.0 network I am going to advertise for both this particular firewall, right? So okay, set prefix is 192.168.2.0 and then we'll save the configuration. So just copy it and paste it on the second firewall, because this particular 2 and 3 I'm going to configure the OSPF as a routing protocol. Okay, so just paste it and enter. So this will save the configuration. Let us view the configuration. Show router OSPF. So what is the command is config router OSPF, set the router ID, then define the area, which is the backbone area. Afterwards, config network. Through the network statement, I'm advertising the prefix. So that's all about this. So we are done with the OSPF configuration for firewall 2 for this specific port 2 interface. And similar way, I'm going to configure for this particular firewall also. That's my firewall 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change only the router ID. So firewall 3, I'm just setting to 3.3, 3 and 3. 3.3.3. So other statement remains the same. It is in area 0 backbone area, and the prefix also I'm going to advertise as 192.168.2.0. Okay. So this makes our work more easier. So just copy it and paste it on the third firewall. Okay, so we are done with the OSPF routing configuration between firewall 2 and 3. So now let us check the OSPF neighbor relationship. Okay, so let us go to firewall 2. So the command is get router info OSPF neighbor. Okay, it's already neighbor relationship is established. So let us copy this and paste it on the third firewall to check the neighbor statement, and it has already been established. So now the next step is, so we are done with the OSPF as a routing protocol between firewall 2 and 3. Then the next step is I'm going to configure a static route from firewall 1 for reaching this destination network, right? So because firewall 1 doesn't know about this network, 2 dot network, so how to check is get router info routing table all. So it is know only about the directly connected networks. Now let us configure a static route. So for configuring a static route, what is the command is config router static. Okay, so just like IP route static we will do in Cisco, in case of Fortigate firewall, config router static, and edit one is making the first entry, and the destination network is 192.168.2.0 is a destination network. So the gateway will be 1.2 and the device set device as port 1. These are the only thing I'm going to do. So just copy this and set the static route from the firewall 1. Okay, it already been saved. So now let us view the configuration. Show router static. So what I have done is config router static, made a first entry, destination is 192.168.2. network, gateway will be this gateway 1.2, and the device is port 1. Okay, so now let us check the routing table. So get router info routing table all. So now you are able to see, I'm able to see the destination network. So because I have created a static route to this destination network with 1.2 as a gateway. So now let us do a ping, execute ping. So 192.168.2.1. So this I will tell the reason why I'm not able to ping. So prior to that, before that, let us finish off the redistribution configuration. Okay, so how to redistribute is just go to config router OSPF, and I'm going to redistribute only the static route. So I'm going to redistribute only the static route. So what's the command is, so what's the command for redistribution is go to config router OSPF config redistribute static, then we have to set the status as enable. Then that means we are redistributing the static routes into OSPF. So then also we have to do config router OSPF, and we have to redistribute the connected routes also. So these are the two commands are mandatory for enabling the redistribute from static to the OSPF routes, because this particular firewall I'm configuring as a border router. Okay, so now let us go and copy this command. So let us now enable this. Just copy it and paste it on the border router. Okay, so we enable the static route. That means static routes redistributed into OSPF. Now let us check the policy. Okay, now I'm going to check the routing table from this firewall 3. I need to check whether these routes are successfully redistributed into OSPF. Okay, static routes. So let us go to firewall 3, get router info routing table all. So still I am not able to see the particular network, one dot network. That means that is the purpose we need to redistribute also the connected routes. Okay, so now just copy it and paste it on the border router. And now let us look into the configuration. So now let us check the execute the command again to check the routing table of OSPF whether the static routes are redistributed into the OSPF routing table. So now I'm able to see the particular 192.168.1.net network are advertised as the external route into OSPF. That means successfully redistributed from static into OSPF. So this particular thing I'm not able to redistribute because I already created a static route. So we are only performing a one-way redistribution. That is a redistribution from the static into OSPF, right? So now let us ping execute ping. So 192.168.1.1. So that means still I'm not able to ping the remote network from firewall 1 to firewall 3 and from firewall 3 to this particular network. Why? Because I already told we need to create a policy. So to allow the communication from port 1 to port 2 and from port 2 to port 1. So for that I have to create two firewall policy. The first policy for allowing from port 1 to port 2 communication, and the second policy is from port 2 to port 1 communication. So now let us take the script. Okay, so the command is config firewall policy edit 1. So edit 1 is nothing but making a first entry, set source interface. So the source interface will be port 1, destination will be port 2, and the source address I am not given any specific address, so I'm defining all and all. Schedule should be always, service also I'm giving as all. Then the action is accept. Okay, this is my first firewall policy, and the second policy is from port 2 to port 1. Okay, so that's the reason I'm making a second entry, config firewall policy edit 2, making a second entry, and source interface will be port 2 to port 1, just like port 1 to port 2, port 2 to port 1, and remaining all the parameters are same. Okay, source address is all, destination is all, schedule always, service we can give, we want to give, we can give specific ICMP service. So in this particular thing giving us all, and action is always accept. Okay, so now let us copy this both the statements, that is two policy, and let us copy and paste it on the border firewall or the border router. And now let us save the configuration. So how to view the firewall policy? Show firewall policy. So now you're able to see port 1 to port 2 communication for the first one, and the second policy is for port 2 to port 1 communication. So remaining all I have set it to default value. So now let us do a ping from firewall 1 to firewall 3 and firewall 3 to firewall 1. Okay, so let us ping 2.1 I am able to reach, and also 2.2 also I am able to reach. So that is the purpose of defining the firewall policy in case of a FortiGate firewall. And also let us do a ping from firewall 3 to firewall 1. Okay, so like 1.1 I am able to reach, and 1.2 also I am able to reach. So the command is get router info routing table all. Okay, this is a command to check the routing entries. So also here also get router info routing table all. Okay, so now I'm able to see the redistributed routes in case of OSPF routing table. So for a quick short summary, what are things we have done is, first we have defined the directly connected interfaces, then we have configured the OSPF as a routing protocol between firewall 2 and 3, then we have configured a static route from firewall 1 to the remote destination network, and then we have configured the redistribution policy for redistributing from static routes into OSPF in this border firewall, and finally we have configured a firewall policy for allowing from port 1 to port 2 and port 2 to port 1 communication. Okay, so that's all about this video, and I hope you enjoy this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more videos. Thanks and have a wonderful day. Thank you.